Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Rambo in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. West Films friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Rambo. I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. This video is produced by West Films. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you apart from this. We will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will give you a small review of the story of this film. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so start the video. Rambo is a 2008 American war action film directed and co-written by Sylvester Stallone, based on the character John Rambo, created by author David Morrell for his novel First Blood. A sequel to Rambo 3, 1988, it is the fourth installment in the Rambo film series and co-stars Julie Benz, Paul Schulze, Matthew Marsden, Graham McTavish, Ray Gallegos, Tim Kang, Jake LaBatz, Mong Mong Kin, and Ken Howard. The film is dedicated to the memory of Richard Crenna, who died in 2003. Crenna had played Colonel Sam Troutman in the previous films. In the film, Rambo, reprised by Stallone, leads a group of mercenaries into Burma to rescue Christian missionaries who have been kidnapped by a local infantry unit. The rights to the Rambo franchise were sold to Miramax Films in 1997 after Carolco Pictures went bankrupt. Miramax intended to produce a fourth film, but Stallone was unmotivated to reprise the role. The rights were then sold to New Image and Millennium Films in 2005, who greenlit the film before the release of Rocky Balboa 2006. Filming began in Thailand, Mexico, and the United States in January 2007 and ended in May 2007. Rambo was theatrically released in the United States by Lionsgate Films and the Weinstein Company on January 25, 2008, and in Germany by Warner Bros. Pictures on February 14th to mixed reviews, with praise aimed at Stallone's direction and performance, action sequences, and musical score, but criticism for its plot, excessively graphic violence, and political commentary. It was also a box office success. It grossed $113.2 million worldwide against a production budget between $47.5 to $50 million. The film was followed by Rambo: Last Blood, released on September 20, 2019. Plot: during the political protests of the Saffron Revolution in Burma, ruthless SPDC officer Major Pa T Tint leads his Burmese army forces in a campaign of fear. His soldiers pillage settlements, sadistically slaughter innocents, abduct teenage boys to be drafted, and hold women hostage to be raped as sex slaves. Meanwhile, 20 years after the events in Afghanistan from the previous film, Vietnam War veteran John Rambo is still living in Thailand, making a living as a snake catcher and providing boat rides. Michael Burnett, a missionary doctor from Colorado, attempts to hire Rambo to ferry his group up the Salween River into Burma on a humanitarian mission to provide medical aid to a village inhabited by the Karen people. Rambo initially refuses, then agrees when convinced by Michael's fiancée, Sarah Miller. During the trip, the boat is stopped by pirates demanding Sarah in exchange for passage, forcing Rambo to kill them. The missionaries arrive at the village, but are later on attacked by Tint's forces, who take Sarah, Michael, and other survivors prisoner while the village is torched. The pastor of the missionaries' church comes to Thailand and asks Rambo to lead a team of 5 mercenaries on a rescue mission. Rambo takes the mercenaries to the drop-off point and offers to help, but Lewis, a former SAS soldier and the team's leader, refuses. Mayint, a Karen rebel familiar with the area, leads the mercenaries to the site of the massacre. As they survey the damage, a squad of Tint soldiers arrive in a truck with a group of prisoners, whom they proceed to torment, where they toss landmines in flood fields and force the prisoners to run across for sport. Rambo arrives in time and kills the soldiers with his bow and arrow, freeing the prisoners. Rambo joins the mercenaries, and they make their way to Tint's camp at night, where they stealthily rescue the rest of the surviving prisoners, leaving a few bodies in the process. The following day, Tint and his soldiers pursue Rambo and the group. Rambo kills some of them by luring them toward a booby-trapped unexploded tallboy bomb, but the rest of Tint's forces fire mortars, one which injures Lewis, and captured everyone except Rambo, Sarah, and Schoolboy, the mercenary sniper. Before Tint's forces can execute them, Rambo launches a surprise attack with an M2 Browning-equipped Technical, allowing the mercenaries to escape and engage them. The Karen rebels, led by Mayant, arrive and join the fight, helping to overwhelm Tint's soldiers and their arriving naval forces. Two of the mercenaries, Inju and Diaz, are killed in the fight. With his entire regiment wiped out, Tint attempts to escape, but Rambo intercepts and instantly kills him with his machete. In the aftermath, Rambo, inspired by Sarah's words, returns to the United States to visit his father at his home in Bowie, Arizona. Cast. Main article, list of Rambo characters. Sylvester Stallone as John Rambo, a hardened Vietnam War commando now residing in Thailand. Julie Benz as Sarah Miller, Dr. Burnett's fiancée and a member of a missionary. Paul Schulze as Dr. Michael Burnett, the leader of a missionary team heading into Burma. Matthew Marsden as Schoolboy, the youngest soldier on Lewis's team who is a trained sniper. Graham McTavish as Lewis, an ex-SAS soldier now leading a Merc outfit. Tim Kang as Inju, a mercenary on Lewis's team. Ray Gallegos as Diaz, a mercenary on Lewis's team. Jake Labatz as Reese, a mercenary on Lewis's team with a knack for singing. Mong Mong Kin as Major Pa T-Tent, the murderous commanding officer of the SPDC in the Karen Rigoan. Ken Howard as Father Arthur Marsh, the church pastor who Bennett's team report to. Supercorn Kitsuwan as Mient, a Karen rebel leading the Mercs to the missionaries. Ong Ai Noi as Lieutenant I, Tint's second in command. Sornram Pachim Tasanakarn as Tha, a young child who is a tracker for Mient. Production, development, and writing. The film was an independent production between New Image and Emmett Furla Films for Equity Pictures Medienfonds GmbH. It was greenlit and sold before Rocky Balboa was released. In between the making of the third and fourth films in the Rambo franchise, the film's original producer, Carolco Pictures, went out of business. In 1997, Miramax purchased the Rambo franchise. The following year, Miramax subsidiary Dimension Films intended to make another film, and a writer was hired to write the script, but attempts to make it were deterred by Stallone, who had stated that he no longer wanted to make action movies. In 2005, the studio sold those rights to Millennium Films and New Image. Stallone had stated that part of the reason that it took so long to produce a fourth film was due to a lack of a compelling story that motivated him to return to the role. An early idea was to have Rambo travel to Mexico to rescue a kidnapped young girl. Stallone thought it was good, however, he felt the idea lacked the essence of Rambo, still wanting the character to be a lost man wandering the world. The premise would later be used for Rambo, Last Blood 2019. Stallone got the idea to set the film in Burma from the United Nations, which he later pitched to producers. The producers found the idea compelling after visiting Karen refugee camps. Mong Mong Kin is a former Karen freedom fighter and stated that if he accepted the role of the film's villain, there was a chance some of his family would have been incarcerated in Burma, but accepted the role regardless, feeling that bringing awareness of the Saffron Revolution was important. Pre-production. A different director was originally attached to direct the film, but left due to creative disagreements. Stallone was reluctant to direct the film due to not being prepared nor having a vision for the film, but later became excited when he came up with the idea of, what if the film was directed by Rambo? What if the film had his personality? Graham McTavish later echoed this idea, stating, "In many ways, Rambo directed the movie." Paul Schulze stated that there were rewrites by Stallone nearly every morning. The film had a production crew of 560 people, including 450 Thai crew members and over 80 foreign members from Australia, America, Canada, Myanmar, and the United Kingdom. Filming. Stallone stated that due to the small production budget, the only way to make the film memorable was to make it graphically violent. He said, "We were all sitting around and looking at the small production budget. Then I said, hey, Fake blood is cheap. Let's make it all out bloody. Filming started on January 22, 2007 and ended on May 4, 2007. It was shot in Chiang Mai, Thailand, as well as in Mexico and the United States, in Arizona and California. While filming near Burma, Stallone and the rest of the crew narrowly avoided being shot by the Burmese military. Stallone described Burma as a hellhole. He said, "We had shots fired above our heads," and that he witnessed survivors with legs cut off and all kinds of landmine injuries, maggot-infested wounds, and ears cut off. Post-production. John Rambo was the original working title for the film, but was changed in the US because Stallone thought that audiences might think that this is the final film in the Rambo series, due to the then recently released Rocky Balboa, 2006, which was not his original intent. In many other countries, the title John Rambo is used because the first Rambo film was known as Rambo in those countries. The film premiered on U.S. television as Rambo, but the title sequence referred to it as John Rambo. On October 12, 2007, Lionsgate Films announced that the film title was being changed to Rambo: To Hell and Back. After some negative feedback from the online community, Stallone spoke with Harry Knowles and said, "Lionsgate jumped the gun on this. I just was thinking that the title John Rambo was derivative of Rocky Balboa and might give people the idea that this is the last Rambo film. And I don't necessarily feel that it will be. He's definitely a superb athlete. There's no reason he can't continue on to another adventure." Like John Wayne with The Searchers. Music. Brian Tyler composed the original score for the film. Stallone wanted Tyler to incorporate Jerry Goldsmith's original themes into the film. He did not rely on Goldsmith's actual theme, though he based his own theme and orchestrations on the style of the original to maintain the musical series. The soundtrack comprises 20 tracks. Release. Home media. The DVD and Blu-ray disc were released in the United States on May 27, 2008. The DVD was released in a single disc edition and two-disc edition. The DVD was released in the UK on June 23, 2008. The film was the 19th best-selling DVD of 2008 with 1.7 meters units sold and an overall gross of $41 of $811,370. In 2010, the film was included into the DVD and Blu-ray release of the Rambo. Complete collector's set, $35. The film was released on 4K Ultra HD on September 3, 2019, featuring the theatrical and extended cut. In the United States and Canada, the DVD earned $40 million and the Blu-ray earned $2.2 million, totaling $42.3 million in domestic video sales. Extended cut. During a panel at San Diego Comic-Con 2008, Cliff Stevenson announced that a slightly different, slightly longer version of Rambo will be released in 2009. It premiered at the 2008 Zurich Film Festival. The extended cut premiered on Spike TV on July 11, 2010, 2 weeks before its Blu-ray debut and to commemorate Stallone's then-latest film, The Expendables. It was released on Blu-ray on July 27, 2010, and runs at 99 minutes. It was marketed as Rambo: Extended Cut, but the film itself replaces the original title card with the original working title John Rambo. The extended cut restructures the film and restores most of the deleted scenes from the Blu-ray and two-disc DVD of the theatrical cut. The Blu-ray features a 7.1 DTS HD mix and an 84-minute production diary titled Rambo: To Hell and Back. Reception. Box office. Rambo opened in 2,751 North American theaters on January 25, 2008, and grossed $6,400,000 on its opening day and $18,200,000 over its opening weekend. It was the second highest grossing movie for the weekend in the US and Canada, behind Meet the Spartans. The film has a box office gross of $130,344,290, of which $42,754,105 was from Canada and the United States. Europe's biggest cinema chain, and the third biggest in the world, Odeon refused to show the film on any of its screens in the United Kingdom due to a dispute with its British distributor Sony Pictures over rental terms for the film. The film was shown in Ireland and the United Kingdom by other theater chains such as Empire Cinemas, View, Cineworld, and Ward Anderson. The film was not shown in the French-speaking part of Switzerland due to legal and commercial problems with the distributor, even if it was available on screens of France and the Swiss German-speaking part. Critical response. Rambo received mixed reviews, with critics praising the film's action sequences and Stallone's performance, but criticizing the film's excessive violence. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 38% based on 152 reviews, with an average rating of 5/10. The site's critical consensus reads, Sylvester Stallone knows how to stage action sequences, but the movie's uneven pacing and excessive violence, even for the franchise, is more nauseating than entertaining. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 46 out of 100, based on 26 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A- on an A+ to F scale. In his review for the New York Times, A.O. Scott wrote, Mr. Stallone is smart enough, or maybe dumb enough, though I tend to think not, to present the mythic dimensions of the character without apology or irony. His face looks like a misshapen chunk of granite, and his acting is only slightly more expressive, but the man gets the job done. Welcome back. Michael H. Price of Fort Worth Business Press wrote, Stallone invests the role with a realistic acceptance of the aging process, and with traces reminiscent of Humphrey Bogart in 1951's The African Queen and Clint Eastwood in 1992's Unforgiven, to say nothing of the influences that the original First Blood had absorbed from Marlon Brando in 1953's The Wild One and Tom Laughlin in 1971's Billy Jack. When asked what his take on the film was, First Blood author David Morrell said, I'm happy to report that overall, I'm pleased. The level of violence might not be for everyone, but it has a serious intent. This is the first time that the tone of my novel First Blood has been used in any of the movies. It's spot on in terms of how I imagine the character, angry, burned out, and filled with self-disgust because Rambo hates what he is and yet knows it's the only thing he does well. I think some elements could have been done better, but I think this film deserves a solid 3 stars. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Stallone singled out the movie as one of his best films. One film I'm truly proud of, it's the best action film I've ever done because it's the most truthful, is Rambo 4, dealing with Burma where they've had a civil war for 67 years. But I got excoriated because the movie's so violent. And it is violent. It's horrifying. It's children being burnt alive. That's what makes civil war worse than anything. It's your neighbor all of a sudden killing you. I was really happy with that film. And I never thought it would ever reach the theater. I thought they're never going to show this. Reception in Burma. The film is banned by the Burmese government. Upon release, the then-ruling military junta ordered DVD vendors in Burma not to distribute the film due to the movie's content. Despite having never been released there theatrically or on DVD, bootleg versions of Rambo are available. The opposition youth group Generation Wave copied and distributed the film as anti-Tatmadaw propaganda. The Karen National Liberation Army has said that the movie gave them a great boost of morale. Some rebels in Burma have even adopted dialogue from the movie, most notably, live for nothing or die for something, as rallying points and battle cries. That, to me, said Stallone, is one of the proudest moments I've ever had in film. Also, overseas Burmese have praised the movie for its vivid portrayal of the military's oppression of the Karen people. Sequel. Main article, Rambo Last Blood. In 2009, Stallone announced plans for a 5th film titled Rambo 5: The Savage Hunt. The film would have been loosely based on Hunter by James Byron Huggins and would have focused on Rambo leading an elite special forces kill team to hunt and kill a genetically engineered creature. In 2011, Sean Hood was hired to write a new script, separate from The Savage Hunt, titled Rambo. Last Stand that Hood described was more in line with the small-town thriller of First Blood. In 2012, Hood revealed that Rambo 5 was on hold while Stallone finishes The Expendables 2, 2012. Hood also revealed his uncertainty whether the film will be similar to Unforgiven or will be a passing of the torch. In 2016, Sylvester Stallone revealed that Rambo 5 was no longer in production. In May 2018, Rambo 5 was re-announced and was scheduled to begin filming in September, with the plot focusing on Rambo taking on a Mexican drug cartel. Stallone was confirmed to be co-writing the script with Matt Cerulnik, but was unlikely to direct. That same month, Stallone confirmed that the film was scheduled for a fall 2019 release. In August 2018, Adrian Grunberg was announced as the director. Principal photography began in October 2018. Rambo: Last Blood was theatrically released in the United States on September 20th, 2019. Does the world need another Rambo outing right now? More specifically, does Burma? Sylvester Stallone's one-man army was last seen aiding the Mujahideen in 1980's Afghanistan, and look how well that panned out. Now he's back for one last hurrah, lending his nuanced brand of gunboat diplomacy to the ongoing conflict between the Burmese military and the Karen ethnic minority, and laying waste to half of Myanmar in the process. Lucky they didn't send him to Iraq, or things might have turned really hairy. The film's first half comprises an arm-twisting justification for the carnage that follows. Soldiers storm a tranquil Karen village, shoot the children, rape the women, and capture a bunch of peaceable American missionaries. That's bad. So Rambo fires up his jalopy and chugs upriver on a mission of reprisal. That's good. Before you know it, even the head missionary is getting in on the act, exuberantly bashing the brains out of a fallen marauder, while our hero provides murderous support from atop a truck-mounted machine gun. Some 236 people are slaughtered during the course of Rambo's svelte 91-minute running time, which surely sets a record for time and motion efficiency. They are shot and they are speared. They are throttled, bombed, and disemboweled. At times, there is something weirdly comforting about the film's no-frills fundamentalist zeal. Its blinkered view of a world split between evil monsters and imperiled saints. It's almost enough to make you forget its risible characters and its boneheaded grasp of geopolitics. What it can't quite do is gloss over the preposterous center-stage presence of its 61-year-old star. Resplendent in a natty bandana, with his jet-black locks cascading around a suspiciously stretched and immobile face, Stallone so resembles his mother that one starts to wonder whether she's been drafted in as a body double for some of the more grueling set pieces. Perhaps the scene in which Rambo is shown tearing out a rapist's throat with his bare hands. Was that a glint of jewelry on those foraging fingers? A gleam of polish on those manicured nails? Full marks to the editor for cutting away before we can tell for certain. After having seen some of the Rambo reviews over at Rotten Tomatoes and the overall rating of only 35%, I fully expected to be disappointed by Sylvester Stallone's second revisiting of an iconic character. So you can imagine that it came as a complete shock to me when I ended up loving it. Rambo opens with real footage of the nightmarish abuses that are currently going on in Burma. It's very disturbing. And at the very least, I believe that Stallone is hoping that this will draw attention to what's going on over there with the military murdering innocent men, women, and children on a daily basis. From there, the film cuts to John Rambo in the Thai jungle. Thailand borders Burma, where he is out with a local man wrangling cobras. The local town's main attraction involves shows where men taunt cobras, pythons, and other dangerous snakes. It seems that he has been living there for a long time, living a Spartan, simple existence among the local people. A group of missionaries shows up at the local village, hoping that he will take them upriver into Burma to deliver medical supplies and assistance. Rambo asks them if they're bringing weapons, and they say no. At that point, he refuses them multiple times, saying that without weapons, they can't change anything. However, eventually the woman in the group, Sarah, played by Julie Benz, appeals to him and convinces him to escort them in his small boat. Sarah ends up being the only one in the group that he really respects. Soon after getting underway, they come across river pirates, and it doesn't take long for old John to be drawn reluctantly into violence once again in order to protect the missionaries in general, and Sarah in particular. Suffice it to say that Rambo has not lost any of his edge in the 20 years that have passed since the last film. I don't think I'll be spoiling anything if I tell you that, of course, the missionaries are captured and that they need some serious rescuing. The twist here is that Rambo doesn't go it alone. A band of mercenaries are actually the intended rescuers, and he is taking them upriver to find the missionaries. Among the mercenaries are a couple of interesting characters, one of which kind of reminded me of myself on a really cranky day. Make no mistake, Rambo is incredibly violent and graphic. If this bothers you, this film is not for you. But if, like myself, you believe that if violence is portrayed in a film, it should be realistic and disturbing, then Rambo delivers in spades. Stallone's latest and no doubt final addition to the franchise lives up to the previous three perfectly. He brings the same life wariness to John Rambo here that he brought to Rocky Balboa in that film that was released last year. Sure, it has some stereotypical characters and moments, but that barely detracts from the overall experience of the film, which will leave you with your jaw dropped several times during the movie. In a desperate attempt to jog my memory about anything regarding Rambo, the 2008 attempt to revive Sylvester Stallone's other notable film franchise, I went back to the review I wrote when it came out. In the final paragraph, I wrote, "Maybe if it does well at the box office, it will inspire Stallone to write and direct a proper wrap-up for a character that has served him long and well, one that will allow him to confront the real world instead of the sub-comic book surroundings of this disappointing effort." Well, 11 years have passed, and Stallone has given John Rambo one more go-around with Rambo Last Blood. The title is perhaps the cleverest thing about it. As the film opens, Rambo is living a tranquil life on his ranch in Arizona, where he now spends his time training horses, doting upon his adopted family, Maria, Adriana Barraza, and her college-age granddaughter Gabrielle Yvette Monreal, sitting on the porch in his rocking chair, perhaps contemplating how his actions in Rambo 3 might have helped lead to the formation of the Taliban. Okay, maybe it isn't entirely tranquil. He is taking tons of pills to combat PTSD. He has an elaborate underground tunnel system that he has dug out beneath his house, the perfect location for the occasional Nam flashback, and he confesses to Gabrielle at one point that in regards to his inner rage, "I'm just trying to keep a lid on it." Having tracked down her long-lost father to Mexico, Gabrielle wants to go down to see him and understand why he left years earlier. Rambo tries to warn her that it is pretty much the most horrible cesspool on earth. But you know these spunky college-bound girls with bright futures seemingly ahead of them. Approximately 9 minutes after crossing the border, she is kidnapped and drugged by a sex trafficking ring headed by the fearsome Martinez brothers, Victor, Oscar Janata, and Hugo, Sergio Perez-Mencheta. When Rambo gets the news that Gabrielle has gone off to Mexico, he goes off in pursuit, but his first encounter with the Martinez gang ends with him brutally beaten and left for dead in an alley with a brand new scar carved into his face. He is rescued by Carmen Paz Vega, an independent journalist who is there to tend to his wounds and offer necessary exposition. Upon healing, Rambo returns to the Martinez joint to rescue Gabrielle in what feels like an even more violent homage to the already grisly climax of the slightly better Taxi Driver. This, as it turns out, is all prelude to the film's climax, where hordes of Mexican killers turn up at Rambo's ranch, armed to the teeth and out for blood, only to discover that he has given his tunnels a Home Alone-style makeover by rigging it with booby traps. All so that he can go after them with arrows, knives, sawed-off shotguns, spikes, mines, and perhaps most cruel of them all, the sound of the doors doing 5 to 1 over a loudspeaker in clear violation of the Geneva Conventions. 40 years on, here's a re-release of the first movie in the Rambo series from 1982. The watchable, if entirely preposterous, exploitation action picture in which star and co-writer Sylvester Stallone makes his first appearance as John Rambo, the decorated Green Beret, Vietnam veteran and commando Ubermensch, in a permanent rage at the way he and his fellow soldiers were let down. It climaxes with an entirely bizarre speech from Rambo on the subject of his PTSD, delivered in Stallone's unintelligible slurred drone. "Big soft body parks everywhere." This was actually the film that came before the one that made Rambo a real movie icon, Rambo First Blood Part 2, 1985, where he has to go back to Vietnam for a fantasy replay of the war, on the grounds that he is searching for urban mythic Mia Pavus. That was the movie that Ronald Reagan watched in the middle of the 1985 Beirut hostage crisis and famously said, "Boy, after seeing Rambo last night, I know what to do next time this happens." As the first story begins, John Rambo is back from Nam and sort of walking the earth, Kane style, looking for an old comrade and stunned to hear he has died from cancer due to Agent Orange. The film certainly does not detain its audience with any pinko-liberal whining on the subject of how Agent Orange did a fair bit of damage to Vietnamese civilians, and not just Rambo's brothers in arms. Then a swaggering bully of a local police chief, Brian Denny, unjustly picks Rambo up for vagrancy and takes him down to the station house where he is beaten up. Rambo busts out of there and is pursued to a remote gorge where this Special Forces hombre holds out against hundreds of beta male cops, and there's only one person who can talk him down. Rambo's old commanding officer, Colonel Troutman, played by Richard Crenna. Devotees of old-school 80s action will enjoy this all over again, and I like to see the pointless action explosions. Rambo torches an entire gas station here for the hell of it, and of course people getting thrown through stunt sugar glass windows, which happened all the time in that era. But for me, Rambo never had the wit or the dramatic limberness of Bruce Willis's John McClane in the Die Hard series. Home has always been an abstract concept for John Rambo, and that's what the last scene of 2008's otherwise expendable Rambo sequel finally gave the iconic Sylvester Stallone character. A moment when this unsettled Vietnam War survivor, looking very much the worse for wear, lumbers up to a mailbox bearing the character's surname. At last, somewhere in Arizona, this duty-bound embodiment of American military might have found his way back to the family ranch. Such closure was in nearly every way antithetical to the spirit of First Blood. That is, the PTSD-fueled franchise's inaugural movie and the eponymous David Morrell novel that inspired it, both of which traded on the notion that a good man who'd gotten a taste of killing had serious difficulty turning off that deadly skill set upon his return. As a result, a sum total of 0 viewers saw that ending as a sign that Rambo would take this long-overdue homecoming as a chance to park his keister and raise chickens or whatever. The only surprise, really, is that it's taken more than a decade for Stallone to make another Rambo movie. As it happens, the actor-producer was busy rebooting a far better series via Rocky Balboa and Creed. And the only unanswered question has been what group of unlucky so-and-sos would be the next to face his wrath. In Rambo Last Blood, another cruel and ugly showcase of xenophobic carnage squeezed into barely 80 minutes and packaged for export, the tired, now septuagenarian action figure turns his notorious sense of loathe thy neighbor vengeance toward the Mexican cartels, who've kidnapped his college-bound niece Gabrielle Yvette Monreal and turned her into a smack-addicted sex slave. Call it Rambo Bad Hombres Edition, featuring fresh south-of-the-border mayhem from Get the Gringo director Adrian Grunberg, in which screenwriters Matthew Cerulnik and Stallone adopt the racist view of Mexicans as murderers, drug dealers, and rapists, devoid of cultural context or exceptions beyond the independent journalist Paz Vega keeping tabs on their whereabouts. Before all hell breaks loose, the movie reveals what a peaceful day on the ranch looks like, opening in the elaborate system of tunnels Rambo has constructed beneath the pasture that surrounds his country home. A sort of precautionary measure borrowed from his friends the Viet Cong, and a perfect playground in which to booby-trap and torment his adversaries in the movie's spectacular climactic bloodbath. Amusingly enough, Last Blood lensed in Bulgaria, doubling for Mexico, whereas Rambo First Blood Part 2 used Acapulco to stand in for Vietnam. Single-handedly doing more to support the Second Amendment than Charlton Heston ever has, Rambo movies view weapons the way Quentin Tarantino does feet. turning a well-greased gun barrel into a whatever cocks your bazooka fetish object. To wit, this film's opening shot dollies past a well-stocked ammunition rack, in which we spy a pair of M16s, a shotgun or two, and several rifles, plus a machete for good measure. So much for background checks. Rambo is clearly waiting for the war to come to him, and if it doesn't, well, he can be counted on to start one. Disregarding her uncle's advice, which sounds like some kind of sociopathic fortune cookie, I know how bad a man's heart can be, Gabrielle crosses the Mexican border to meet her deadbeat dad, Marco de la O, only to be drugged, kidnapped, and sold to the Martinez brothers, Victor, Oscar Jaenada, and Hugo, Sergio Perez Mencheta. A pair of retrograde stereotypes, clumsily recycled from 80s action movies, neither as scary as the Sicario drug lords, nor as memorable as Robert Davies' Bond villain. These two siblings so intimidate their captives that the young women dare not run away even after Rambo liberates them. Early on, Victor threatens one such escapee, but stops short of punishing her in a scene that feels as if it may have been softened after test screenings, whereas no brutality has been spared against the anonymous platoon of cartel thugs Rambo later decimates. Yes, but they deserve it, one might argue. This is the reductive one-man-against-the-world reasoning by which Rambo has always operated, and I don't buy it. Rambo, who is bludgeoned till his eyes won't open and gashed on the same cheek that was scarred in First Blood Part 2, always sustains some kind of humiliating beatdown before getting his payback. That's the long-established formula for this franchise. In the past, he's used military operations to justify his rage. This time it's personal, or so the cliché goes, although the sentiment has seldom been less convincing. Same goes for Stallone's crocodile tears. Here, it's the screenwriters, not the cartel, who should be held accountable for conjuring a virginal relative only to violate and degrade her. Suddenly, the infamous wall along the U.S.-Mexico border seems inadequate, less in containing the cartels than in protecting them from Rambo's brand of vigilante justice. After decapitating one of the Martinez brothers, Rambo returns to his ranch, where he proceeds to perform one of his signature montages. An extension of the gratuitous gun barrel worship we got before, only this time it involves setting a dozen or so grisly death traps, every one of which audiences will have the pleasure of seeing sprung upon faceless henchmen. One actually cleaves a goon's face in thirds, sparing Rambo the trouble of his usual skull-bursting finishing move. It's horrible, gut-wrenching butchery to behold, and yet it's been calibrated to elicit whoops and cheers from fans, who faithfully followed along as Rambo evolved from long-haired drifter scuffling with an overzealous local sheriff in the relatively realistic First Blood, to bare-chested, bandana-wearing global enforcer in a series of increasingly outrageous sequels. For many, this will be their first Rambo movie, which they can enjoy unencumbered by the psychological baggage of his past. What a frightening sight Stallone must be to neophytes, stumbling Frankenstein-like through his tunnels, bellicose veins bulging in his swollen temples. Rambo always favored brute force over the more reasonable hearts and minds approach to modern warfare, and here, as if to prove his point, he rips both of those body parts from his foes' chests. This character is a mess of contradictions, representing on one hand the permanent damage that military service can do to one's soul, while simultaneously suggesting what the ideal soldier looks like. Rambo wins the wars that America can't, and the blood isn't likely to stop here, or anytime soon. For over 25 years, Sylvester Stallone's mythic commando Rambo variety has thrilled audiences worldwide, from ragged and flashy First Blood, the New York Times, to the shockingly entertaining Rambo, the Seattle Times. The series chronicles a reluctant killing machine as he wages war against corrupt global forces, all while facing a battle within his own soul. Rambo, the complete collector set, has everything the ultimate Rambo fan needs, including all 4 films together for the first time. Review. I've never actually reviewed the Rambo movies, so rather than doing individual reviews, I thought I would go over the Blu-ray box set which has all 4 films together. For me, the Rambo saga is one of the few movie series which doesn't have a weak entry. I love all 4 films, with First Blood Part 2 being my personal favorite. I know some people think he becomes too much of an unstoppable hero, but that's just why I love it. Jerry Goldsmith's bombastic, heroic score, the political undertones in all 4 movies, and the perfect casting of Stallone makes this box set a must-have. Interestingly enough, when we did a poll last year, fans voted the 3rd movie as their favorite in the series. All 4 have their merits. In terms of a serious action film, First Blood stands the test of time well, with Brian Dennehy perfectly cast as Sheriff Teasel. In the book, we find out a little more about his character, and that he fought in the Korean War and was bitter against Rambo for being a Nam vet in a war that got more attention. The acting in the first movie is the best in the series, and despite Stallone muttering during his final breakdown, it remains incredibly moving and tragic. Parts 2 and 3 are more cartoony, but I love them all the same, and the action is just awesome. Rambo 2008 is one of the most violent movies I've ever seen, taking the series in a more serious direction for a new generation. Not much else to say about the films, other than if you're a fan of action movies, then you just need to own them. But what are the special features? Well, a lot of them are carried over from previous DVD releases, but there are some fantastic features, including a commentary from Stallone himself for First Blood. He provides an insightful look at the film, providing plenty of anecdotes in his own imitable style. He discusses how the Rambo movies came to be from script to screen, and it's one of the best commentaries I've heard. There's also a commentary from First Blood writer David Morrell, which is also fascinating. I have to admit I'm not normally a fan of audio commentaries, but the ones on this Blu-ray are first-rate. We get 6 minutes of deleted scenes, including the original ending, which was interestingly pretty similar to the ending of the book. There is a featurette called Drawing First Blood, which goes over how the novel became the film and gives us details behind the making of it. The audio and sound quality maintain the grim look of the film, but it's remastered nicely with some awesome DTS sound. Rambo First Blood Part 2 only has an audio commentary from the late great George Cosmatos, but it's not as interesting as the first movie. We Get to Win This Time is a 20-minute documentary which has some interesting stories from cast and crew members who share various tales about making Part 2 and is a fun look into the film. Sadly, there isn't really anything else for Part 2, which is a shame, as my fave entry deserves better. Audio and picture are excellent though, once again with another DTS track which comes into its own during the final action-packed 30 minutes. Rambo 3 has a pretty cool commentary from director Peter McDonald, who talks about the film's production and is surprisingly honest about the behind-scenes problems. It also has a 30-minute documentary called Land in Crisis, which explores the importance of Rambo and also gives us a brief history of Afghanistan. It's a surprisingly fascinating look at the reality behind the film and definitely worth sitting through. There are multiple featurettes as well, which focus on the weaponry and music of Rambo, a history of Burma, and more. This film has the best special features of the series and also includes some deleted scenes and a trailer gallery. Picture and sound quality are spectacular, with the final bloody 20 minutes looking better than ever. There are a few other special features, including picture-in-picture, bonus view, which provides some cool behind-the-scenes footage, as well as Stallone's commentary. It's funny how the tone of this film was surprisingly grim. Where parts 2 and 3 are more balls-out action heroic, Rambo 2008 is incredibly violent, with a body count literally in the hundreds. The Rambo movies were a huge staple for action lovers back in the 80s. Whereas the latest installments in the Stallone-led franchise haven't been received well, the first 3 films, which came out between 1982 and 1988, were hugely popular. Collectively, they grossed close to $700 million worldwide. This wasn't Marvel movie money, but it was good money at the time. The movies normally presented war veteran John Rambo as a man who could do it all. He was the perfect killing machine sent by the gods to destroy every evil earthling that stood in his way. However, as time has passed, some things about Rambo haven't aged particularly well. There are lots of old movies which are still without blemishes when examined with modern critic spectacles, but the Rambo films don't fit into that category. Here are some things that might have appeared okay back when the films were popular, but don't look so good right now. First Blood cemented Stallone's place as Hollywood heavyweight. His Rocky doubters no longer had anything to say. Surprisingly, due to wrangles behind the scenes, it was almost never released. However, the film's storyline was totally anti-police. First Blood is basically about John Rambo taking out hundreds of cops single-handedly in the small town of Hope, Washington, and he does so in a very brutal manner. Rambo's actions were understandable. He had been arrested and abused by the town's police department, yet he had just come to see a friend. However, in the current climate, the movie would be seen as something that promotes phobia and disdain for law enforcement. Hating the police might sound cool in rap songs and in movies, but when you are in real trouble, 911 might be your only hope. In Rambo 3, John goes to Afghanistan to fight the Soviet army, which is said to be controlling the country. The Soviets have also made the mistake of kidnapping his friend, Colonel Troutman. While he's there, he briefly seeks the help of Afghan fighters popularly known as the Mujahideen. Nothing wrong with getting a little help, right? Yeah, right. Well, it was later revealed that former al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden was also part of the Mujahideen in the 80s. Wow. Good old John was fighting in a group that gave birth to a terrorist leader. It doesn't look so good, whichever way you look at it. Rambo has always been too good for all his enemies. In every single movie except First Blood, his kill statistics easily pass the 100 mark. He rarely needed a sidekick or fellow soldiers. But this was very unrealistic. No man can take out that many people on his own. It's no surprise that pre-90s movies involving teamwork like Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket are considered better war films than the Stallone flicks. Seeking to embrace reality, modern action flicks have ditched this cliché. Even if the hero is a skilled operative or former veteran, modern movies try to make him as human as possible. However, the Rambo franchise has refused to evolve. Equally, critics have refused to show the latest installment dubbed Rambo Last Blood: Any Mercy. In 2008's Rambo, Stallone's character works with the Karen rebels in Burma as they fight against the oppressive government. However, this situation is very complicated in the real world. There are those who see these real-life Karen rebels as the biggest obstacles to peace in Burma, Myanmar. The government has been at war with the rebels for close to 60 years. That's a bloody long time. And in as much as they've received support from countries like Britain, there are those who argue that Burma would be fairly peaceful if it wasn't for the guerrilla warfare by the Karen rebels. It looked cool at the time, but right now you can't help but question its necessity. In all the Rambo movies, Stallone would tie a piece of cloth around his head, implying that a couple of bad people were about to be sent to the afterlife. It was the ultimate badass moment, but it made no sense at all. Was the headband supposed to increase his powers? Bandanas like the red one, like the one Stallone wore in 2008's Rambo, are quite controversial. Headbands normally imply gang affiliations. Most members of criminal organizations like the Bloods of Los Angeles are known to tie pieces of clothing around their heads. Tying a red piece of cloth around your head in order to kill generally seems absurd, too. Rambo Last Blood is only a few months old, but it is already aging poorly. The film sees John Rambo fighting Mexican cartels who have kidnapped his adopted daughter and forced her into prostitution. It's hard to understand why Mexican drug dealers, not human traffickers, would need an American prostitute. It's a stretch. Since Stallone co-wrote the script, you get the feeling that he just wanted to pit his beloved character against the Mexicans. The film has already caused controversy for promoting hatred against Mexicans. Some critics say the movie is promoting the narrative that most Mexicans are crooked criminals that have to be dealt with. Why don't you just hire good screenwriters, Mr. Stallone? I watch this movie. What you see is what you get. Limbs fly, men's throats get pulled out, men get gutted, bodies explode. Have 50 caliber weapons ever appeared so good as they have in this movie? The Barrett and Browning 050 guns are handled by Stallone as if they're individual members of the cast. The Barrett discharges like a bomb going off, and Stallone turns an entire cast into chaff violence in this movie. Desperately out of place as we probably wouldn't have got an Expendables trilogy. This movie practically revived an entire genre, like a bull raging through a toy store. It somehow lived up to its predecessors. Rambo A is a 2008 American war action film, directed and co-written by Sylvester Stallone, based on the character John Rambo created by author David Morrell for his novel First Blood. A, sequel to Rambo 3 1988, it is the fourth installment in the Rambo film series, and co-stars Julie Benz, Paul Scholes, Matthew Marsden, Graham McTavish, Rayos, Tim Kong, Jake LaBatz, Mong Mong Chin, and Ken Howard. The film is dedicated to the memory of Richard Crenna, who died in 2003. Crenna had played Colonel Sam Troutman. In the previous films in the film, Rambo, reprised by Stallone, leads a group of mercenaries into Burma to rescue Christian missionaries who have been kidnapped by a local infantry unit. The rights to the Rambo franchise were sold to Miramax Films in 1997 after Carroll Pictures went bankrupt. Miramax intended to produce a fourth film, but Stallone was unmotivated to reprise the role. The rights were then sold to New Image and Millennium Films in 2005, who greenlit the film before the release of Rocky Balboa. 2006 filming began in Thailand, Mexico, and the United States in January 2007, and ended in May 2007. Rambo was theatrically released in the United States by Lionsgate Films and the Weinstein Company on January 25, 2008, and in Germany by Warner Brothers Pictures on February 14th, to mixed reviews with praise aimed at Stallone's direction and performance action, sequences, and musical score, but criticism for its plot, excessively graphic violence, and political commentary. It was also a box office success. It grossed $130.2 million worldwide against a production budget between $47.5 to $50 million. The film was followed by Rambo Last Blood, released on September 20th, 2019. Movie plot: during the political protests of the Saffron Revolution in Burma, ruthless officer Major Paddy Tint leads his Burmese army forces in a campaign of fear. His soldiers pillage settlements, sadistically slaughter innocents, abduct teenage boys to be drafted, and hold women hostage to be raped as sex slaves. Meanwhile, 20 years after the events in Afghanistan from the previous film, Vietnam War veteran John Rambo is still living in Thailand, making to hire Rambo to ferry his group up the Salween River into Burma on a humanitarian mission to provide medical aid to a village inhabited by the Karen people. Rambo initially refuses, then agrees when convinced by Michael's fiancée, Sarah Miller. During the trip, the boat is stopped by pirates demanding Sarah in exchange for passage, forcing Rambo to kill them. The missionaries arrive at the village, but are later on attacked by Tint's forces, who take Sarah, Michael, and other survivors prisoner. While the village is torched, the pastor of the missionaries' church comes to Thailand and asks Rambo to lead a team of 5 mercenaries on a rescue mission. Rambo takes the mercenaries to the drop-off point and offers to help, but Lewis, a former SAS soldier and the team's leader, refuses. Mint, a Karen rebel familiar with the area, leads the mercenaries to the site of the massacre. As they survey the damage, a squad of Tint soldiers arrive in a truck with a group of prisoners whom they proceed to torment, where they toss landmines and flood fields and force the prisoners to run across for sport. Rambo arrives in time and kills the soldiers with his bow and arrow, freeing the prisoners. Rambo joins the mercenaries, and they make their way to Tint's camp at night, where they stealthily rescue the rest of the surviving prisoners, leaving a few bodies in the process. The following day, Tint and his soldiers pursue Rambo and the group. Rambo kills some of them by luring them toward a booby-trapped, unexploded tall boy bomb. But the rest of Tint's forces fire Mortars 1, which injures Lewis and captured everyone except Rambo, Sarah, and Schoolboy, the mercenary sniper, before Tint's forces can execute them. Rambo launches a surprise attack with an M2 Browning-equipped technical, allowing the mercenaries to escape and engage them. The Karen rebels, led by Mint, arrive and join the fight, helping to overwhelm Tint's soldiers and their arriving naval forces. Two of the mercenaries, Enju and Diaz, are killed in the fight, with his entire regiment wiped out. Tint attempts to escape, but Rambo intercepts and instantly kills him with his machete. Cast Sylvester Stallone as John Rambo, a hardened Vietnam War commando now residing in Thailand, Julie. Benz as Sarah Miller, Dr. Burnett's fiancée and a member of a missionary. Paul Scholes as Dr. Michael Burnett, the leader of a missionary team heading into Burma. Matthew Marsden as Schoolboy, the youngest soldier on Lewis's team, who is a trained sniper. Graham McTavish as Lewis, an ex-ass soldier now leading a Merc outfit. Tim Kong as Enju, a mercenary on Lewis's team. Rigallos as Diaz, a mercenary on Lewis's team. Jake Labatz as Ree, a mercenary on Lewis's team with a knack for singing. Mong Mongchin as Major Potty, Tint the murderous commanding officer of the SBDC in the Karen Regoyan. Ken Howard as Father Arthur Marsh, the church pastor who Bennett's team report to Supacorn Kitsawan as Me, a Karen rebel, leading the Mercs to the missionaries. Ang Ai Noi as lieutenant, I Tint second in command Sorman Patcham to Sanarnarn. As a young child who is a tracker for Mant Production, the film was an independent production between New Image and Emmett Furla Films for Equity Pictures, Media and Fawn GmbH. It was green-lit and sold before Rocky Balboa was released, in between the making of the third and fourth films in the Rambo franchise. The film's original producer, Carroll Pictures, went out of business in 1997. Miramax purchased the Rambo franchise the following year. Miramax subsidiary Dimension Films intended to make another film, and a writer was hired to write the script. But attempts to make it were deterred by Stallone, who had stated that he no longer wanted to make action movies. In 2005, the studio sold those rights to Millennium Films and New Image. Stallone had stated that part of the reason that it took so long to produce a fourth film was due to a lack of a compelling story that motivated him to return to the role. An early idea was to have Rambo travel to Mexico to rescue a kidnapped young girl. Stallone thought it was good. However, he felt the idea lacked the essence of Rambo, still wanting the character to be a lost man wandering the world. The premise would later be used for Rambo Last Blood. 2019, Stallone got the idea to set the film in Burma from the United Nations, which he later pitched to producers. The producers found the idea compelling after visiting Karen refugee camps. Mong Mongchin is a former Karen freedom fighter, and stated that if he accepted the role of the film's villain, there was a chance some of his Saffron Revolution was important pre-production. A different director was originally attached to direct film, but left due to creative disagreements. Stallone was reluctant to direct the film due to not being prepared nor having a vision for the film, but later became excited when he came up with the idea of what if the film was directed by Rambo? What if the film had his personality? Graham McTavish later echoed this idea, stating in many ways Rambo directed the movie. Paul Scholes stated that there were rewrites by Stallone nearly every morning. The film had a production crew of 560 people, including 450 Thai crew members and over 80 foreign members from Australia, America, Canada, Myanmar, and the United Kingdom. Filming, Stallone stated that due to the small production budget, the only way to make the film memorable was to make it graphically violent. He said, "We were all sitting around and looking at the small production budget. Then I said, hey, fake! Blood is cheap. Let's make it all out bloody." Filming started on January 22nd, 2007 and ended on May 4th, 2007. It was shot in Chiang Mai, Thailand, as well as in Mexico and the United States, in Arizona and California. While filming near Burma, Stallone and the rest of the crew narrowly avoided being shot by the Burmese military. Stallone described Burma as a hellhole. He said we had shots fired above our heads, and that he witnessed survivors with legs cut off and all kinds of landmine injuries. Maggot-infested wounds and ears cut off. Critical response: Rambo received mixed reviews, with critics praising the film's action sequences and Stallone's performance, but criticizing the film's excessive violence on Rotten Tomatoes. The film has an approval rating of 38%, based on 152 reviews, with an average rating of 5 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, Sylvester Stallone knows how to stage action sequences, but the movie's uneven pacing and excessive violence, even for the franchise, is more nauseating than entertaining. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 46 out of 100 based on 26 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences pulled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A- on an A+ to F scale in his review for the New York Times AO. Scott wrote, Mr. Stallone is smart enough, or maybe dumb enough though, I tend to think, not to present the mythic dimensions of the character without apology or irony. His face looks like a misshapen chunk of granite, and his acting is only slightly more expressive. But the man gets the job done. Welcome back, Michael H. Price of Fort Worth Business Press wrote, Stallone invests the role with a realistic acceptance of the aging process, and with traces reminiscent of Humphrey Bogart in 1951's The African Queen and Clint Eastwood in 1992's Unforgiven, to say nothing of the influences that the original First Blood had absorbed from Marlon Brando in 1953's The Wild One and Tom Laughlin in 1971's Billy Jack. Reception in Burma. The film is banned by the Burmese government upon release. The then ruling military Huna ordered DVD vendors in Burma not to distribute the film due to the movie's content, despite having never been released there theatrically or on DVD. Bootleg versions of Rambo are available. The opposition, youth group Generation Wave, copied and distributed the film as anti-Tato propaganda. The Karen National Liberation Army has said that the movie gave them a great boost of morale. Some rebels in Burma have even adopted dialogue from the movie, most notably, live for nothing or die for something, as rallying points and battle cries. That, to me, said Stallone is one of the proudest moments I've ever had in film. Also overseas, Burmese have praised the movie for its vivid portrayal of the military's oppression of the Karen people. Rambo Movie Review: John Rambo got tamed in the 2-decade hiatus that separates his last outing from this month's simply titled Rambo. Formerly John Rambo, Rambo 4. Rambo 4 in the Serpent's Eye. The Vietnam vet has taken up fishing, packed on a few pounds, and nailed a faux peaceful look to his strangely unwrinkled features. But Sylvester Stallone wants us to believe that somewhere underneath his massive frame still lies a killing machine tough job, since he slumbers through his own movie as a supporting character, rather than the one-man army who almost single-handedly created the genre that defined the eights. We get a script glued together from bits and pieces of Rambo First Blood, Part 2, the jungle setting, and Rambo 3, the rescue mission, that barely allows the ultimate soldier to wrap his meaty fists around any sort of action. After years living peacefully in Thailand, Rambo reluctantly agrees to take a group of Christian relief workers into war-torn Burma. We can make a difference. The blonde and frail Sarah, Julie Ben, tells her skeptical guide, who replies repeatedly, go home, she should have listened. As her group arrives at a generic third world village, they are brutally attacked. The villagers are slaughtered and the survivors, why there are any, is a mystery. Taken prisoner, Rambo gets the news size and goes to the rescue. Ham-fisted dialogue aside, we expect Rambo to at least deliver in the action stakes, and deliver it does. But the main man is left on the sidelines. Rambo leads a band of mercenaries to the rescue against an army of faceless bad guys. It's these taggers along who do the lion's share of the heavy lifting, or at least heavy shooting. Meanwhile, the baddies are developed, not even a little. We have no idea why these men are holding hostages in the middle of the jungle, nor are we given any clue as to how, if at all, it relates to the ongoing civil war there, but they sure are bad. Soldiers shoot at prisoners as they run through a minefield. Rape and decapitation are common practice as counterbalance, and to satisfy the audience's bloodlust. Perhaps Rambo goes heavy on the gore, very heavy. When the action kicks in, torn limbs and exploding heads became part of the scenery in a never-ending climax designed for the Xbox generation. See, for example, Rambo turning a soldier into meatloaf using heavy artillery in one unusually inspired scene. The real problem with Rambo is the lack of an anchor. The late Richard Crenna was perfectly cast as the franchise's Colonel Troutman, and for that matter in Hot Shots Part 2, because he knew how to steer Rambo in the right direction. The character is sorely missed here as Sly himself acknowledges by giving Rambo a dream sequence where Troutman tells him to stop denying who he really is, a killer. The other problem is Rocky Balboa. With the triumph of his sad and tender winner from last year, Sly thought he could win the 80s kids all over again through sheer nostalgia. But Rambo is no Rocky. He doesn't have a soft side. He needs to mope a little, but then step straight into the action period, pushing 62. The actor-director was in the perfect position to tell the tale of the boxer in need of one last round. A tale that mirrored his own career, but here he can simply no longer deliver the kind of stunts expected from an action movie. The charisma-deficient mercenaries, one called Schoolboy, come on, who tag along, are a cheap excuse to provide thrills, leaving the audience with nothing to cheer but the all-too-fleeting Rambo moments. An exploding arrow here, total carnage there. The brief running time, a bit under 1.5 hours, makes the whole experience bearable. But overall, Rambo feels like the trailer for an adventure that never really ignites in the 1980s and into the 1990s. One of the most durable genres in the American cinema was the big, dumb, fun action movie, empty calorie exercises and elaborate set pieces and corny one-liners. We still have action movies, of course, and they're still big and dumb, but very few of them are any fun. I blame computers at least a little bit when every third shot contains a digital hero instead of a flesh and blood Chuck Norris, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Steven Seagal, etc. The result lacks a certain liveliness. Not to mention computers have done away with the small, fun action scene. If it doesn't involve 12 locations and at least 2 speeding trains, it's not good enough anymore, whatever the reason. And it's not just the rise of CGI. I know action movies just aren't what they used to be. I bring this up on the release of the second film within a year to bring back the big, dumb, fun action movie after Live Free or Die Hard brought one old franchise back for a much belated 4th entry. Sylvester Stallone's Rambo does the same thing to an action trilogy, whose last entry was released nearly 20 years ago. Except for a big, dumb, fun action movie, Rambo goes rather far out of its way to avoid being much fun. Of course, the cinematic adventures of John Rambo were always a bit too serious for their own good. First Blood, much the best of the series indeed, the only good one in the bunch, was less an action film and more a drama about a disturbed Vietnam vet who can't deal with normal life and lashes out with violence at anyone who crosses him. Rambo First Blood Part 2 was a self-conscious attempt to give moderates a psychological victory, and Nam Rambo 3 was at least partially a lesson about the Mujahedin in Afghanistan. While I'm thinking of it, I'd like to call attention for the way that none of the 4 films in the series have been titled the same way. Must be merry hell for the video store clerks anyway. The first 3 Rambo films were all semi-serious looks at the problems facing the world, mixed in with fantasies about how much better the world would be if the American military could just whoop the hell out of our enemies, the Vietnamese, the Russians, leftists, the Curious thing about Rambo is that while it is still a hawkish wank about how the US should poke our nose in everybody's business, it's specifically a call to American intervention in Burma. Burma, that's not, let us say, high on the list of places that average American filmgoer thinks about when the dinner table conversation turns to interventionism. So, it's not like the others. A bit of red meat for neocons. It's an attempt to educate the U.S. on the terrible state of a faraway country. And while I applaud the intent, a big, dumb, fun movie can't be dumb and won't be fun if it's actually meant to work as a political call to action. As such, it opens with a short montage of news footage, most of it British documenting the atrocities committed by the Burmese government against the Karen rebels. A Christian community. Later on, the film depicts the savage destruction of a village full of farmers and missionaries. A sequence, directed with considerable skill and exactly the correct amount of restraint, we see just enough of every violent act to make it clear what happened, and some of it is the stuff of nightmares, a baby thrown into a bonfire, for instance. But never does the camera linger over the blood and devastation. It's just about the best scene Stallone has ever directed, and a good sequence by any yardstick, visceral, and hard to forget that. Hard to forget is the problem every Rambo film has to negotiate the same turn about 1/3 of the way through. How to go from a geopolitical piece to a blowing up good piece in the first sequel. This is achieved by essentially resetting the whole plot in the second sequel. This is achieved by having the first act make no sense at all, so that the audience has no preconceptions in Rambo. The goal is clearly to negotiate that shift by changing the plot around. In Act 1, John Rambo, now living in seclusion in the jungles of Thailand, brings a group of prayer book-toting American Christians to Karen territory. In Act 2, he brings a group of mercenaries to Karen territory to rescue the Americans in a government camp, but where Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rambo 3 use the real world as a pretext. Rambo's done such a bang-up job of convincing the audience that the situation in Burma is the closest thing to hell on earth, it's basically impossible to forget all that and enjoy. The copious action that follows the very brutal violence that opens the film casts a pall over the very movie fake violence that follows, which is a bit of a shame because some of that fake violence isn't half bad, certainly better than the hectic and confusing finale of Rambo 3, and blessed with the escalating absurdity of a real 80s action picture. Particularly in the moment when Rambo explodes what is probably not a nuclear device, but which has the ability to level a couple square miles of forest. Fountains of the red stuff spew with satisfying regularity. And Stallone, though clearly older, has lost none of the skills that made him work in the role to begin with. Large muscles and a threatening monotone. It doesn't make the action look as effortless as the fourth Die Hard did. The CGI is obvious, but it's fun enough as a simple guilty pleasure, and perhaps the best straight-up mayhem the series has offered. What with the superior first film lacking much ultra-violence and the first sequel sputtering in between set pieces. But for all that, it's just too hard to get into it. The beginning of the film sets the wrong tone altogether. It's a guilty pleasure, all right? And one that puts extra emphasis on the guilt. Maybe this was the point. Maybe Stallone was consciously working to point out the danger of rooting for movie violence in a violent world. But the last act doesn't read that way. It's as rousing as can be, with all the proper moments of death shot and edited to demand cheers and applause. It was just 13 months ago that Stallone brought another long dormant franchise out of mothballs, turning in the best film in the series since the first. But the Rambo movies were never as good as the Rocky movies, and Rocky Balboa is an entirely different animal than Rambo, raising questions of aging and the very idea of reviving that which did not need revival. Rambo is just a big, dumb action movie, and while it has the right ingredients to be good enough, it sabotages itself too much to click. It's much better than we had any right to expect, but a great Rambo movie is still Faint praise in Rambo leaves a taste much more sour than exhilarating other information about this film, Sylvester. Stallone's 2008 Rambo sequel, the fourth in the franchise, was a critical dud, but the action star still believes it to be the best and most truthful action film of his career, set in Burma, also known as Myanmar. The film is set against the country's long-ranging civil war. This piece of the film's narrative felt so controversial, Stallone didn't think it would even make its way to theaters. One film I'm truly proud of. It's the best action film I've ever done, because it's the most truthful, is Rambo 4 dealing with Burma, where they've had a civil war for 67 years, he told The Hollywood Reporter. But I got excoriated because the movie's so violent, and it is violent. It's horrifying. It's children being burnt alive. That's what makes civil war worse than anything. It's your neighbor, all of a sudden killing you. I was really happy with that film, and I never thought it would ever reach the theater. I thought they're never going to show. This U was kinder than many critics at the time, giving it AB, despite it being up to its boot tops in numbing violence. We also called it the best movie 1986, never. Gave us on Rambo 4. I wanted to show what a .50 caliber could do to a human being. We took a dummy and filled it with 200 pounds of beef. He recalled, I thought, when I fire, it will knock the dummy over. There were no bullets in the gun. It was just the force of the compression in the shell, but it turned the dummy into mist. It blew it apart. Then I turned the .05 caliber to a row of bamboo trees, and it literally cut them in half. This is without bullets. The Oscar winner also touched on the way political viewpoints explored in the franchise have been misinterpreted since the first installment. Rambo First Blood was released in 1982. He very one assumed Rambo is a conservative, he said. President Reagan posted a picture going, "Rambo's a Republican." I went, oh, Rambo is totally neutral. Reagan's fascination with the character is well documented in 1985. He was caught on a hot mic joking about handling hostage negotiations like the character. Since then, the concept of Rambo politics has come to articulate an aggressive and hyper-masculine brand of politics. But the 76-year-old insists the character, a Vietnam veteran who's fought off American bureaucrats as much as he has Soviets and warlords, is actually critical of America. Furthermore, he himself rests in the middle of the aisle. He doesn't even live in this country. He feels scorned by it. And my politics are, may the best man win. I voted on both sides, but I'm definitely in the middle. Stallone insists people assume I'm the same as my character, and I do talk to everybody. I think it's crazy not to actually, I avoid some people because it sends out the wrong message. You're asking yourself, do I really need this controversy when it was released in 2008? Rambo felt like a work of blunt opportunism. Sylvester Stallone had recently directed and starred in the excellent franchise revival Rocky Balboa, and with that film scoring with both audiences and critics, it likely seemed a commercially savvy move to undertake the same revival with Stallone's other popular franchise as John Rambo. He had played arguably the most iconic entertainment figure of 1980s America, as the character transformed over 3 films, from embittered Vietnam veteran in Ted Koch's First Blood to jingoistic Superman in Peter McDonald's Rambo 3. While admirable effort was made in 2008's Rambo to bring the character back to ground, he nonetheless was the star of a ridiculously violent and gory exercise in military excess. The visuals of a muscular white American murdering a few hundred Asian men to rescue one vulnerable blonde woman were unsettling, to say the least. To be fair, the racist undertones are alleviated slightly by the film slipping a new people of color into the mercenary team, but it still lurks suspiciously in the corner. As for the violence, and it really is remarkably graphic and harrowing stuff, whether or not it feels appropriate likely comes down to how each viewer feels about screen violence in general. Rambo does not engage in the comparatively sanitized violence of earlier films. Bodies are blown to pieces by landmines. Soldiers are literally shredded by heavy machine gun fire. Civilians get beheaded or have their limbs hacked off on screen. And in one particularly confronting moment, a toddler is ripped from its mother's arm and forcibly thrown into a burning building. The bodies simply lie where they fall. When other characters stumble upon them days later, they are bloating in the humidity and are swarming with flies. Rambo alone kills more than 250 enemy soldiers during this film, and it's only a 90-minute film. There is an important question worth raising about screen violence in this sort of war zone context. Is it better to make violent deaths clean and with a minimum of blood, thus avoiding any risk of indulging in grand gignal blood and gore? Or is it better to bluntly demonstrate that violence is messy and horrible? To be honest, Rambo treads an uneasy line between realism and exploitation that makes such a debate all the more relevant towards it. Certainly the violence matches the film's exceptionally bleak outlook. A group of missionaries want to help persecuted Christians in a pacifist manner. The appalling injustices being inflicted on these Karen rebels simply does not allow for a pacifist response. Rambo insists before dropping the missionaries off to their fate that their peaceful ways won't save anything by the film's conclusion with an exhausted and emotionally shattered Rambo standing among literally hundreds of bodies. It is hard to justify that the violent approach worked much better. This is a film hell-bent on demonstrating that war is hell. Stallone delivers a strong performance, the best he's provided the character since the 1982 original. There is not an interaction with the USA for once. The missionaries may be American, but the patriotic underpinnings of Rambo, First Blood Part 2 and Rambo 3 are pleasantly absent this time around. Rambo goes to war not to rebel against the USA or to further its interests, but because it is simply the right thing to do. It is the best of the First Blood sequels. Tightly stripped down and intense, although it's worth nothing, the significant drop-off between the original and the subsequent 3 more detail after almost a 20-year hiatus. Rambo is back, as with the well-received Rocky Balboa in 2006, the new Rambo movie is the latest Sylvester Stallone effort to bring back the names that made him a star. The film sees Stallone reprise his role as Vietnam War veteran John Rambo. He also directed and co-wrote the film. Unlike Rocky Balboa, Rambo doesn't quite live up to its namesake and is more or less a film filled with nothing other than mindless action. The story starts off showing our hero John Rambo Stallone making a living as a snake catcher and boat operator in Thailand near the Burmese border. A group of missionaries led by Michael Burnett, Paul Scholes, and Sarah Miller, Julie Benz approaches Rambo to take them to a rebel-supported village in Burma for a humanitarian mission. Rambo initially refuses, but eventually agrees to the request and takes the missionaries to their destination. All goes well until the village is attacked by the ruthless Burmese army, who captures some of the missionaries and slaughters everyone else in the village. It is now up to Rambo and a group of mercenaries to go into the Burmese military base and rescue the imprisoned missionaries. One of the few good things about Rambo is that the character John Rambo actually looks to be in pretty good shape and of the correct age. He might be a little older and more tired of the world, but thanks to clever use of camera angles and loose clothing, Stallone's character still looks fit and up to the task of gunning down legions of enemy soldiers in order to save the day. Unfortunately, that's one of the few good things that stand out in this film. The biggest downside of the new Rambo movie is the lack of a decent plot. The story is overly simplistic, very predictable, and more or less just an excuse for Rambo to open fire and rack up a huge number of kills. The body count gets pretty high in this movie. There also isn't much in terms of character development. Unlike some of the previous iterations of the series, John Rambo at the start of the film is more or less the same John Rambo at the end of the film, but I suppose the character is at the point where nothing really can be changed about him. The Action in Rambo is decent and nicely paced, but there's nothing special about it, and the climax sequence is a bit too long and monotonous. The film's shortcomings added together mean that Rambo is nothing more than an average action flick, albeit one with a very high body count. So overall, the new Rambo movie isn't going to win any awards anytime soon. If you are a fan of the previous Rambo films or old school American action movies, then Rambo is worth a look for nostalgia, if nothing else. Otherwise, it's just an average action movie that provides nothing more than 90 minutes of mindless entertainment. Maybe that's not such a bad thing in a desperate attempt to jog my memory about anything regarding Rambo, the 2008 attempt to revive Sylvester Stallone's other notable film franchise. I went back to the review I wrote when it came out in the final paragraph. I wrote, maybe if it does well at the box office, it will inspire Stallone to write and direct a proper wrap-up for a character that has served him long and well, one that will allow him to confront the real world instead of the subcomic book surroundings of this disappointing effort. Well, 11 years have passed, and Stallone has given John Rambo one more gowned with Rambo Last Blood. The title is perhaps the cleverest thing about it. As the film opens, Rambo is living a tranquil life on his ranch in Arizona, where he now spends his time training horses, doing upon his adopted family, Maria Adriana Barza, and her college-aged granddaughter, Gabrielle Ayet Monreal, sitting on the porch in his rocking chair, perhaps contemplating how his actions in Rambo 3 might have helped lead to the formation of the Taliban. Okay, maybe it isn't entirely tranquil. He is taking tons of pills to combat PTSD. He has an elaborate underground tunnel system that he has dug out beneath his house, the perfect location for the occasional Nam flashback, and he confesses to Gabrielle at one point that, in regards to his inner rage, I'm just trying to keep a lid on it, having tracked down her long-lost father to Mexico. Gabrielle wants to go down to see him and understand why he left years earlier. Rambo tries to warn her that it is pretty much the most horrible cesspool on earth. But, you know, these spunky college-bound girls with bright futures seemingly ahead of them. Approximately 9 minutes after crossing the border, she is kidnapped and drugged by a sex trafficking ring headed by the fearsome Martinez brothers, Victor Oscar Janetta and Hugo Sergio Paris Manetta. When Rambo gets the news that Gabrielle has gone off to Mexico, he goes off in pursuit. But his first encounter with the Martinez gang ends with him brutally beaten and left for dead in an alley with a brand new scar carved into his face. He is rescued by Carmen Pega, an independent journalist who is there to tend to his wounds and offer necessary exposition upon healing. Rambo returns to the Martinez joint to rescue Gabrielle, in what feels like an even more violent homage to the already grisly climax of the slightly better Taxi Driver. This, as it turns out, is all prelude to the film's climax, where hordes of Mexican killers turn up at Rambo's ranch armed to the teeth and out for blood, only to discover that he has given his tunnels a Home Alone-style makeover by rigging it with booby traps also, that he can go after them with arrows, knives, sawed-off shotguns, spikes, mines, and perhaps most cruel of them, all the sound of the doors doing 5 to 1 over a loudspeaker in clear violation of the Geneva Conventions taken simply on its own merits. Rambo Last Blood is an undeniably awful movie. While the previous installment may have brought to mind many of the cheapo Rambo knockoffs produced in the 80s by Cannon Films and featuring the likes of Chuck Norris or Michael Dudikoff, this one feels more like a direct-to-video item that inexplicably made it to multiplexes. The screenplay by Stallone and Matthew Cyrilnik is an unforgivably clunky work in which even the most rudimentary of plot points have been cast aside. The dialogue is embarrassingly heavy-handed. I want them to know that death is coming, and the kinetic thrills that made Rambo First Blood Part 2 watchable have been replaced by over-the-top carnage, made even less effective by the over-reliance on CGI gore behind the camera. Adrian Grunberg, who previously did get the Gringo south of the border, sleeves fest that was made with a certain style and wit is clearly directing this by the numbers, but based on the overly dark visual style and clumsy staging, he never gets out of the single digits. Yes, some of the insanely gory bits during the final stretch are amusing in a sick way, but even those moments are too little and way too late to help matters much. Here's what I cannot figure out about Rambo Last Blood. Stallone is a smart man, a singular screen presence, and has shown strong acting chops when given material that allows him to take full advantage of his talents. Perhaps he doesn't feel quite as close to the character of Rambo as he does Rocky Balboa, because Rambo was not a creation of his. Nevertheless, the original First Blood 1982 remains an uncommonly strong, smart, and thoughtful film, and his performance there is still one of his best. The follow-ups may not have come close in quality, but they were successful enough to make one think that if this film is truly the final film, appearance of John Rambo Stallone might want to put some effort into sending the character off with some degree of respect, as he did with his greatest creation in Rocky Balboa and the Creed films. Does he honestly think this is a fitting conclusion to a role that helped make him one of Hollywood's biggest stars? For his sake? Let us hope not. Pretty much a ripoff through and through. It clocks in at just under 90 minutes, at least 10 of those dedicated to an end credit sequence, featuring highlights from all the previous films, including the one that just concluded, Rambo Last. Blood is junk from start to finish without giving anything away. It should be noted that the ending does not in any way prevent the possibility of another film, Rambo Last Blood Part 2 perhaps, if this one makes a killing at the box office. Well, if that does happen, maybe Stallone will take my advice and give the character a worthy send-off at last, barring that maybe he can just scrap the idea and do Rhinestone 2 instead. A notion that strikes me as being far more appealing at this point. Extra information for a series that's commonly referred to with sarcasm, condescension, and described as outdated 1980s action schlock that's since become a parody of itself. It's amazing how integrated the Rambo franchise 1982, 1985, 1988 has become in American culture and the global cinematic action canon as a whole. Whenever a character goes off the rails or loses all emotional control going into a high-octane, action-packed, blood-fueled rampage, it's regarded as going Rambo hell, even in video games and in first-person shooters, FPS in particular fast-twitch action and shoot them up. Gameplay is referred to as Rambo style. The ironic thing is that the franchise's first film, First Blood, neither had the principal character's name in the title, nor was it a full-fledged action movie. It had that post-Vietnam War angst-ridden, a creepy jungle forest stalking vibe. And yes, Sylvester Stallone did indeed shoot things up with a heavy machine gun. But as a whole, the story was far more of a brooding, patient psychological thriller than any kind of over-the-top, muscle-bound commando film. Only one guy died in the whole movie, and that was by accident. No, most of the series fame or infamy, depending on who you ask, stems from the series. First two sequels, both of which feature plenty of ridiculous action sequences involving Americans taking on those pesky Soviet forces, Viet Cong in Rambo 2. Spetsnaz Special Forces in Afghanistan in Rambo 3. Fast forward to 2008, and we have Sylvester continuing his trend of resurrecting his iconic franchises from decades prior, e.g. Rocky Balboa 2006 for a fourth film, simply titled Rambo. The shocking thing with this third sequel in a franchise which is now like the Expendable series, 2010, 2012, 2014, surviving on nostalgia fumes from Generation XRS, is how well it combines elements from both the franchise's origins and its over-the-top sequels. Rambo features plenty of violence, gruesome kills, and creepy Southeast Asian jungle stalking, but its overall mood and message is as brooding and dark as First Blood, and then some. That's what Stallone's passion project has going for it. It understands all aspects of its franchise's legacy and embraces them rather than trying to circumvent or apologize for them. Like The Expendables. This type of action isn't for everyone, and many will be flat out shocked or repulsed by the final amazing, brutal, breathtaking shootout. But for what it's worth, Rambo's new Millennium Update does exactly what it's supposed to do. The benefit of modern action cinematographic technology combined with that now exceedingly rare kill everything. Insight 1980s mentality yields incredibly potent action. Again, if you're into this sort of thing, I myself enjoyed the patient build-up to the explosion of action at the end of the film. Much of the film's likability stems from its captivating premise. The story starts with an aging, jaded John Rambo living a quiet, secluded life in Thailand. Eventually, a missionary group approaches him with the prospect of transporting them to Burma, where they plan to provide humanitarian aid to victims of the Saffron Revolution. Rambo is apathetic and cynical before being prodded back. An overall believable, unsettling transition. What's shocking about this latest Rambo is how patient it is and how often the focus of the film expands beyond its titular character. Most of the film is dedicated to sneaking and slinking through the dense, muddy, humid jungles of Thailand with brief, periodic spikes of ultraviolence that Stallone clearly loves teasing us with until the explosive finale. Additionally, Rambo doesn't go at it alone this time around, as he's joined by a relatively charismatic team of mercenaries who help him mow down the evil military oppressors and rescue the aforementioned missionary group, whom inevitably get themselves captured. The only downside to all this patient storytelling and somewhat sparse action buildup is that it takes a while to get to that stereotypical Rambo action, which thankfully brings us to the best scene. In the film, the much Ball 50 caliber machine gun sequence that pays obvious homage to the classic final shootout from Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch 1969, you could call the sequence too little, too late for a film titled Rambo. But then again, this movie is about summarizing all of the franchise's legacy, including its best film to that end. The Zoo-5 Cal shootout is terrific and delivers every sort of cinematic carnage and hardcore violent imagery one could ask for in a movie. It's brutal, and it looks amazing. Wrapping the project in a nice shiny bow is the ending, something that I wish Stallone would respect by not making Last Blood, though that is a fitting title. What Rambo provides is great closure for the series and Stallone's legacy as a whole, even if part of that legacy is maintaining series well past their welcome and driving franchise names into the ground. In hindsight, it's amazing how the film was released in January, typically Hollywood's dumping ground for really bad and or unmarketable films of 2008, which was the same year The Dark Knight 2008 and Iron Man 2008 debuted in the end. Though it's nice to see John Rambo return with a vengeance and go out on his own terms, even if actually because he has to be prodded into action by a misguided Call of Duty. I'm not sure whether Last Blood will negate that or not, but as it stands now, the Rambo franchise exited stage right with its dignity intact and a sizable box office win. Sometimes you just got to go full Rambo, and the people will pay to see that. When they started reviving classes as it didn't look good, I think Terminator 3 started it all. A film that I categorically hate. Camponator might be a better title than there was the double blow of Alien vs. Predator. Only Paul W.S. Anderson could ruin two franchises. With one movie, then Live Free or Die Hard, these were bad updates to good films. So when Rambo was coming down the pipe, the worst was feared, I specifically remember how my mind was placed at ease. A violent, ripping, three-nut preview being passed on to Ain't It Cool after seeing that clip I gave in and allowed myself to be hyped. This was no ordinary trailer, and it seemed to fit right with the legend, and it didn't disappoint. Rambo, for kind of a mixture of First Blood, which I think is the best of the four, and Rambo 2+3 Rambo is less a caricature than he was in the previous two, but retains the sheer kinetic excitement of both. Rambo is vulnerable Again, and that helps, another refreshing thing about this film, and our reference to Stallone's Goulet, is the setting, and to be honest, by 2008, I was getting sick of Middle Eastern movies. So it was good to have Stallone come out of left field with Burma as the hotspot with this film. It's also like Stallone stuck two fingers up to the cookie-cutter direction of the action genre. By 2008, the comic book movie was staking over everything seemingly the action genre too. Where were the films for people who didn't give about feature length? Toy adverts over here said Rambo given a big U to trending. I have a eating grin on my face when I watch this movie. What you see is what you get. Limbs fly, men's throats get pulled out, men get gutted, bodies explode. Have .050 caliber weapons ever appeared? So good as they have in this movie. The Barrett and Browning .050 guns are handled by Stallone, as if they're individual cast into chaff when he spawn camps with the Browning. You know, if it wasn't for the ballsy action and violence in this movie, desperately out of place in as we probably wouldn't have got an Expendables trilogy. This movie practically revived an entire genre like a bull raging through a toy store. It somehow lived up to its predecessors. This film, directed by Sylvester Stallone, written by Art Mastorelli Sylvester. Stallone, produced by Abby Lerner, Kevin King Templeton, John Thompson, starring Sylvester Stallone, Julie Benz, Paul Scholes, Matthew Marsden, Graham McTavish, Ray Gios, Tim Kong, Jake Labatz, Mong Monken, Ken Howard, cinematography Glenn McPhersonson, edited by Sean Albertson, music by Brian Tyler, production companies Millennium Films, New Image Equity Pictures, Median Fonts GmbH and Company KG4, distributed by Lionsgate Films and the Weinstein Company United States, Warner Brothers Pictures Germany. Release dates January 25th, 2008 in United States, February 14th, 2008 in Germany. Running time 91 minutes. Countries: United States, Germany, language English, budget $47.5 to $50. Million box office, $113.2 million. So friends, this is the detailed review of the film Rambo and some interesting facts about this film. Hope you like this video. Do give our video a like and subscribe, West Films, to our channel to watch.